Next, we're going to talk about physical layer security. So why do we dedicate a whole module to physical layer security? Well, I like to keep up with a lot of the webinars and current hacking techniques and such, and I've been seeing a lot of attacks being very successful at the physical layer. We're doing a pretty good job at protecting the network layer, and they're starting to resort back to physical layer attacks. Additionally, computer security is really melding with physical security. See on a lot of the everything over IP, like alarm systems and video camera control. And it's common, you know, when you come into a firm and you're the security guy or the computer guy, they'll usually hand off those type of systems to you as well. Remember, disrupting the power or cooling can be just as damaging, or if not more, than a virus or denial of service. And that's probably one of the easiest places to get to when you really think about it. You know, where are the power panels actually contained? Where's the AC unit sitting? You know, how hard is it to stick a hanger inside those spinning fans outside? It's one of those places we're really not watching, but like I said, it can be very detrimental to computer equipment to have the power or cooling disrupted. And again, once an attacker has access to your server room, all the software in the world won't save you from what he or she can do. So some of the concepts we're going to be going over is restricting access to locations, some vulnerability points, common access methods such as keys, electronic cards, and etc. Public and private spaces. We're going to be going over monitoring and who is allowed actual access. We're also going to talk about reporting breaches and testing out our system. And remember, the CCNA Security doesn't go as deep as I will into physical security, but like I said, it's one of those things that definitely needs to be looked at and brought into our security planning. So when we get into the concept of area access, always remember the concept of least privilege. You know, only those people that require access to that location should have access to it. And make sure that we're closely controlling that access method. We've got a lot of different methods out there. Commonly, keys are one of the big ones, so having a proper key control, making sure that the keys are being signed out and allotted to the proper people, and accountability of those keys is being monitored. Electronic card access, I've been seeing a lot more of that out there. Basically, where you can swipe your badge up against an electronic keypad and you get access depending on your privileges. So making sure that that's being closely monitored as well. You also want to think about your vulnerability points in a location. You know, commonly doors and windows are our biggest vulnerability points. But what about things like roof or basement access? With the fear of getting a little bit too spy movie-ish, you also want to look at those unusual places like crawl spaces, boiler rooms, AC duct rooms, those kind of places as well. A lot of the access methods, you know, doors and windows. Are there one-way doors? Do you have fire doors? Are there usage alarms on those doors? You know, things like that can really control access into a building. Elevators, if the building does have elevators, do they have some method for controlling the floor access? Don't forget, you probably don't want to go too cheap when you're actually buying the door locks. The quality of locks can really affect not just time it takes for somebody to pick a said lock, but you know, just the quality of lock, as far as, and even that is the door frames. Think about your electronic card access systems, and remember places that might be controlled either by a security guard or a person, even like a secretary, you know, permitting or controlling access to a place. As always, don't forget the quality of your other security devices and the training that those personnel will receive. When you're thinking about, when you're looking at a map perhaps of your building, you probably want to clearly define your public and private space. Make sure that that is, you can have all those placards up, for example, you know, consent to monitoring, you know, authorized personnel only, those kind of places. Make sure you clearly define your public and private space. Who is actually have badge access? Is badging the only method that we're using to get into this area? One thing to think about, bathrooms are usually a common gray area. You know, it's pretty common to see the bathrooms behind or into the private space, and it's pretty easy for someone to come up and ask if they can use your restroom. So just remember, when you're denying access to private space, that you properly train everybody to identify the difference between the public and private space. Remember, there are always going to be exceptions. You know, you're going to have the bug guy come in to spray. You're going to have the delivery guy come through. But make sure, you know, you have escorts, you know, things like that. A lot of places I've been seeing have been using identifying or visitor type badges to identify those type of people. And if they don't have it, your employees should be asking why that person is behind or in the private area and doesn't have a badge. Monitoring is very important. I've been seeing a lot of camera systems, especially voice or over IP camera systems. Make sure that you're running a schedule for the checks of electronic logs. A lot of those badging places, they'll give you a website or a computer application to go in and actually view and monitor, you know, when doors were opened and by who, and make sure that you periodically check those or have a set time or a schedule for that. Remember, with that badges idea, your employees all of a sudden become a second set of eyes out there. If they have badges, you know, and your visitors are supposed to have badges, you know, they can pretty much start figuring out when intruders or people that don't have badges or aren't supposed to be in an area without an escort. And finally, you can always use things like sensors. You commonly see that sensors, or you'll get those chassis alarms on your servers if you crack open the case and stuff. So there's a lot of different sensors out there. They can tell you when racks were opened, all sorts of stuff. Remember, with access permissions, to roll with that least privilege. There's very little reason for the accountant to have access to the server room in most cases. So we usually, in buildings or in locations that I work in, will pretty much restrict access just to the necessary people. And it's always good to use multiple access permissions or access methods. You know, deny access through locks, electronic passcodes, badging systems. You know, switch it up a little bit. The more barriers that you put in place, the tougher it's going to be for somebody to get in there. As always, make sure you lock your racks and carefully control those keys. It's very, very important. So even if somebody does get access through all these other methods that we put in place, finally they're sitting there staring at a very tightly controlled and locked rack. And don't forget, every employee should be suspicious of outsiders. Make sure they ask questions, and they can do it in a helpful manner, but make sure that you're training them in order to identify and try to look past some of those social engineering tricks that hackers will use to gain access. Now, if a breach does actually happen, you should have in place some sort of building security or police. The police can be involved. Usually management will designate a security officer kind of as a additional duty, possibly to somebody in the building, and making sure that that person has a set of instructions and checks and such to do. Make sure that they're reporting to management or that security officer, you know, doors being open, windows being open, all that kind of stuff. Safety is always the #1 concern. If you come onto a building and the door or window is broken, of course we're not going to enter that location, but notify the authorities. But also, if you do enter that area, remember, you know, you could possibly corrupt any forensics that need to be done. And always report unusual activity like photographing unusual wires or devices running nowhere, things like that. Usually when a hacker is doing reconnaissance of a location, it's not going to be a one-time thing. So you may see people out there taking photographs one day, you know, sitting in a car with a one-way antenna the next, you know, that kind of stuff. So reporting that unusual activity, you can usually make it much more difficult for hackers to get in there. And remember to log all these incidents, so that way you can, you know, perform those checks. You can have a running incident log of everything that's happening, and maybe just taking a look at that log will actually bring in, you know, some reconnaissance techniques that they're trying to use. You know, if they're spreading it out over the days or weeks, and you notice that there's a advent of unusual activity, that you can actually maybe find that out and head it off at the pass.